Conversations with the Mind podcast, where we explore consciousness through conversations with interesting people. Our mission is to engage the collective mind piece by piece to bring greater clarity of mind to our listeners locally and across the planet, and to contribute to broaden the shared experiential knowledge and wisdom of existence.
All right, welcome back, folks. Welcome back to Conversations with the Mind. I'm your host, Shane Lemaster. We're here for episode number 82 with Andrew Walsh. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, Shane. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I mean, I've recognized, recently my consciousness, it's oscillating between. So I've been working on like this spiritual path for a long time and like focusing up here in this higher vibration of consciousness. But with all that's going on in the world, it's triggering old survival, primalistic energies, and it's sort of like oscillating. It's like fluctuating between the two. So I'm managing it as best as possible, trying not to engage in old habits, but trying to find a smoother way through it. How about yourself?
Yeah, I can definitely identify with that. First the COVID pandemic, when that sprung its head, and then when the protests started going through, both times at the very beginning, I just saw myself consuming a lot of media and noticing how it worked myself up into this frenzy. And I had to take a step back, disconnect from the phone, disconnect from the media. And then I was, able to notice that difference, that calm, that was able to settle in a little bit easier. And so having those back to back and just seeing myself react in a similar, but, a little bit better about it this time, I feel like, because I'm aware of the habits that will get me into that frenzy. And I'm also practicing the habits to bring me back down to that calm.
Nice. So I only ask one standard question on the show, and it's always the first question, and that is, and it ties back into what you were just saying. The show is called Conversations with the Mind, and so I'm wondering, when you hear that phrase, Conversations with the Mind, how does that resonate? What comes up for you? Like, what sort of ideas flow through your head when you hear that phrase, Conversations with the Mind, and how does it show up in your life?
Yeah, I think it's a really cool name, first of all, and I think the way that it resonates for me is like the mind has all of these thoughts, like with the pandemic and all this frenzy that's going on. It's kind of shooting these thoughts every which way at you, and your consciousness is trying to really have a conversation with it. You're saying like, okay, what's actually happening here? And how can we get to know what's going on, and how can we process it? How can we integrate it? And it's the name seems very, not diplomatic, but approachable, right? It's like we're trying to have a discussion. We're not trying to attack. We're not trying to dismiss or anything. We're just trying to have a discussion and gain information so that we can improve.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you listen to other podcasts, but Joe Rogan has this idea, and I think it's a really clever idea about this aspect of consciousness, about thought and ideas and things like that, especially right now, right? Like trying to pay attention to what comes through this mental filter. And these ideas that, ideas are things, that they have physical presence out in the field, outside of us, and that our brain interacts with these ideas that are floating around in space, and some of these ideas are not our own, and including the example of media, right? So those ideas that you're reading are not your own; they're somebody else's, right? So you can think about it in that tangible way, but otherwise, you go outside and you have these thoughts to yourself, but some of those might not be yours either. Some of those might be sort of what's just floating around and percolating, and you have to be able to distinguish like which thoughts are useful, which ones are not useful. And you're talking about engaging habits too. I'm wondering what sort of strategies you're using.
In terms of practices to kind of help keep me grounded and maintain that center. So the first one that I've been practicing daily is Qigong. And Qigong, if I'm not sure how familiar you are, but
Yeah, I am, but the audience might not be.
okay. Oh, okay. Well, it's this ancient Chinese health system, and it's similar to Tai Chi in that you're using movements to help move energy to different parts of the body. Also, those movements help in cleansing certain areas of the body, helping to clear thoughts and bring a more harmonious balance to your mind, your body, aligning those things. um, and so yeah, I had a course on it at least a year ago that I started up, and since I've been doing it daily, I can notice when I don't do it, if that makes sense. Same thing with my other habit of meditation, where if I don't do it, I notice how irritable I can be. I notice how maybe off or maybe a lack of energy, and so those would be my two main habits that I use in my routine pretty much every morning and every night. And what else am I doing? Um, oh, well, I've been exploring different types of meditation too. So the one that I'm most familiar with and have been practicing for the longest time is mindfulness meditation. Basically, keeping track of your breath, keeping track of bodily sensations, um, releasing your attention from certain thoughts that hold them, and then kind of returning back to wherever you're anchoring your attention. Um, but recently, I've been practicing the loving kindness meditation, which is, I would kind of almost group that with like a gratefulness meditation. And then also uh, this whole last month, transcendental meditation, which I can't really give it a fair evaluation because I feel like a month isn't necessarily uh, a just enough time to really feel the benefits or to really know what it's about. But I can say that I have reached some pretty deep states of that no thought, almost like a jhana state, if you're familiar with that. And so yeah, I'm definitely going to continue to practice that and see where it takes me.
Nice, man. I love all that. The first thing about the qigong, I
Yeah.
come from what would be considered like hard martial arts, right? So,
Right.
fighting arts, Muay Thai, Sambo, and then Jiu-Jitsu too. Very physical, external martial arts. And I found great value internally from that, like a lot of internal growth, a lot of loss of the ego, a lot of these things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I view, and oftentimes, Qigong, Tai Chi, they're seen by the harder martial arts community as being like, well, they're termed soft martial arts or not even martial
Right.
arts at all.
Yeah.
But I would argue that they're not, I mean, yeah, they're soft, but they're not about developing the external. They're like an internal martial art, right? Like you're fighting against yourself to learn how to control this flow of energy through the body, or learn to work with it rather than fight it, I should say.
Yeah.
So I like that idea of internal martial arts. And then the meditation stuff, man, I love how diverse meditation is, right? So many
Yeah.
people, especially here in the West, have this stereotypical view of meditation, which is usually most aligned with Zen meditation or the no mind
Yeah.
meditation. But there's literally thousands of types of meditation for different aspects of the mind. Meditations on
Yeah.
death, loving kindness, compassion generation meditations, meditations for peace, for performance. I have a background in sport and
Yeah.
performance psychology, so visualizations and imagery to try and like get yourself to perform at peak. So I love the diversity. I haven't gotten too deep into transcendental specifically, but from what I know about it, I mean, just the word transcendental, sort of has this resonance about like transcending your humanness, going a little bit beyond just what it means to be a physical human, whatever that means.
Yeah. So transcendental meditation, also was not super familiar with it until about a month ago. And there's this online course called Masterclass, and they have basically like a bunch of celebrities that kind of teach classes. Like Neil deGrasse Tyson has one, Gordon Ramsay, all kinds of stuff like that. And I stumbled upon this cinematographer's video who was able to explain transcendental meditation pretty well, at least for me. And the way that he kind of described it was the reason it's called transcendental meditation is because, like you said, you are transcending. The mind has all these different layers, right? You have your conscious mind, and then your unconscious mind, subconscious, and it'll go down. But eventually, you'll get to this point where it's no longer mind. You start to enter into the field, or the quantum field, where all potentiality, all possibility exists. And so you're kind of transcending those levels and going straight to the field. And the way that you do that, it's so funny because there's like a transcendental meditation organization that has sort of trademarked and coined this term, which I see kind of, I have an issue with, I guess. But basically, you have one sort of phrase, a mantra, that is not associated with anything. It could literally just be a couple syllables or just a random sound. And you repeat that mantra in your head over and over and over again. And kind of, I believe the idea behind it is that you're focusing on this mantra that has no association with it, no meanings, no affiliations. And by doing that, you're conceptually focusing on nothing. And so by focusing on nothing, you are actually transcending those levels of mind into the field. And so I can't say if I've for sure gotten to, that level, but there have definitely been some times where I felt very calm, very clear, and even if thoughts or things do come in, it's not like they grab my attention. They kind of just like rebound a little bit, and they kind of bounce off easily, effortlessly, in fact. And so, yeah, I've been practicing that for about a month, and I'll keep working at it just to kind of see if I can get anything else deeper into it. But it is pretty interesting. I do enjoy that idea of transcending beyond those levels of mind and focusing on nothing. I think the reason behind that is because they believe that your mind and your body will naturally gravitate towards a state of harmony. So if you can focus on nothing, then you will just automatically start shifting to that joy, that fulfillment, and being grateful.
Nice, I like that a lot. Your video froze on me, but that's okay. I can still hear you, so it'll catch up. No, it'll catch up. It's interesting because the way you talk about transcendental, the mantra work is great, and I use a lot of mantra work for other reasons. If I'm about to step on the mat for a jiu-jitsu competition, like I have a specific mantra that I repeat to myself over and over, but it's to elicit a very specific mental state that I find most productive for my application, right? I love the idea of focusing on nothingness, and the way you describe consciousness, right, as this peeling back of layers. And for those who are just listening and can't see the video, you sort of described it as this descending. The transcendence is the lower, the lowest level of the layer, or the lowest layer, pure consciousness, maybe the field. Whenever I've thought of consciousness, my thought tends to go towards like higher and higher states, right? So it's multi-layered, but then above those layers are higher and higher states of consciousness, or the emergence or connection to the field. So now that your description makes a ton of sense too, going down deeper and deeper. So I'm wondering if it's like a two-sided thing, right? Where in the middle is like human consciousness, And you can go down in the levels to get into the field, but you can also you can transcend up through the levels, through higher states, and also reach the field. It's almost like this dual polarity.
Yeah, so that gives me an idea. So maybe like as you go deeper into these fields of consciousness, you are raising your vibration. So like as you go deeper inside, the higher the vibration, the lower the field you're going into, and I guess the way that I'm describing it, you're going lower and lower, and the way I see it is like into yourself, like into that inner core, that part of you that is pure consciousness, and you're connecting with that. And then yeah, I kind of believe that you lower, well, because sorry, I have brain waves I'm now associating with those, like going beta, alpha, theta, gamma sort of thing. Um, and so I imagine that those brain waves are probably associated with, no, they are associated with those deeper states of meditation. And you're probably, you know, I guess your frequency is going to be increasing as you go down because it's higher consciousness, higher emotions, or like higher elevated emotions like loving, kindness, gratefulness, etc.
That makes a lot of sense. It makes total sense in my mind when you describe it as going deeper into yourself.
Yeah.
And who knows if we're ever gonna, figure out what's actually happening. But one of the main reasons why I wanted to have you on today is because of your interest in sound therapy, sound as healing, music as medicine, and we're here talking about frequency and vibration. And to some of the listeners out there, they're probably hearing that and they're like, what is this like hippie verbiage that they're using? I'm not a frequency, like I'm totally solid, right? But quantum physics and regular physics and Buddhist philosophy is now knowing for a long time that we are essentially vibrating quarks, vibrating atoms, vibrating particles at all times, in all states, all at once. And it's the vibration that changes when we experience things like mood change or a shift in mental health or trauma. Like that's all impacting this sort of vibrational, you can think of it as like a microbiome, but with vibration, with magnetic resonance. And so this has all been shown. This has been proven through science. The Buddhists have talked about this for thousands of years, and they've mapped consciousness. So now we have like this modern Western scientific lens re-examining the properties of sound and the potential for sound to be another, like a master healer. And so I'm fascinated by, fascinated to hear what you've been learning in your certification program to be a sound therapist.
Yeah, I like the way you described that, and because that's the way that I've approached a lot of Eastern traditions, is using my science and analytical background to help me understand why these things work. Because I've seen people go through sound therapy sessions, or I've experienced it myself, and I'm like, there's something to this, like this actually works. And so now I'm just trying to, rationalize in my head, how is this working? And so I definitely came to the conclusion going through graduate school, you know, the same way that we went deeper and deeper through the subconscious mind and transcendental meditation, you can also do that in terms of, let's say, physical or matter, where you go from the cellular level down to the molecular level, atomic level, subatomic, and then you go into that same field, right? There's no more quote unquote physical, but now it's all possibility, it's all potentiality. And so the reason I feel this is so effective and able to have such a healing effect on us is because these instruments, like my sound therapy bowls that I have, these instruments are specifically tuned for or to interact with your field, or to interact and complement your vibration. So if you could think of it as, let's say this bowl has a vibration that is conducive to healing, right? Or for cellular repair, for lightening your mood, all sorts of things like that. So as it vibrates, as it sends those frequencies, those sound waves to you, it is helping your energy, your cells, your mood, everything. It's helping those aspects of yourself go towards a more harmonious state. So like this is already in that harmonious state, and it's literally just sharing that energy with you. And then as a facilitator, as a practitioner, you also understand that your state of mind and the thoughts and the energy that you put out very much in the same way projects waves of energy that will influence the person or the client that you're working with.
Yeah, I love that. It's so interesting because, I mean, it makes total sense. It's like our bodies are tuning forks, and the balance and the resonance that we're talking about here includes physical balance and good health and things like that people usually associate with the terms. But we're more speaking to like the resonance, the vibration, and finding harmony and balance, so that tuning fork is like singing as opposed to making this weird distorted sound because it's all out of balance. And the sound, the instruments you're talking about are like when you bring two tuning forks together and then they find harmony and they start vibrating together, they share that and they work on each other in that way. I love that. I mean, for all the listeners out there, like just imagine if you've ever been to a live concert, like that can be medicine, man. I feel amazing, really good shows. I go through emotional ups and downs. I work through traumas and memories. I do all sorts of healing just by listening to music, because it's literally changing my frequency. The artist, the director, the composer is using their artistry to share something so beautiful with me that goes beyond words, right? It's this vibratory field state.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that music aspect up because, I mean, just think about how much music affects you. Like certain songs will make you sad, certain songs will make you really hyped up and excited, or maybe they'll make you really introspective. And that's very much the same sort of effect that these instruments can have on you. And it's depending on what you're going for, you can use them for lots of different things. But in general, it's kind of like we're here to help you relax. We're here to help you calm down because, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry, my computer just froze on me. Okay. Yeah, the instruments are here to push you towards that healing aspect, right? And well, they're push you towards that relaxation because when you're relaxed, when you're balanced, when you're centered, you can listen for that inner wisdom, or maybe you can learn about what's been causing an issue for you, and really just start drawing up some things that have maybe been not noticeable to you because you've been so busy, or just doing other things.
So are there specific instruments that are primarily used for this kind of like sound, this healing sound therapy? And because I find like some electric guitar, like some Jimi Hendrix, like that's just like soul. That's like, I don't know, that's a part of me that's medicine for sure. But are there certain instruments, and then are there also like specific frequencies that are also sort of like what you aim for based on like if the client comes in and says like I want to feel less depressed or happier, is there a certain frequency that you can help them resonate with that promotes or is shown to promote specific things?
So the sound therapy is so broad. We're talking from singing bowls like I have to didgeridoos and gongs and tuning forks even. little symbols, like all kinds of things that you can use to help someone move into a more meditative, relaxed, or healing state. But specifically for me, the singing bowls were taught during the certification class different protocols. So there's different protocols for different types of treatments and ailments. So if you are depressed, then there actually is a specific protocol for depression. Or if you do just want to relax, there's a specific protocol for those things. Um, and so, yeah, the certification course is a very good chunk of it is learning the protocols that are appropriate for a certain ailment. And and then there's a lot of other things involved with that, but that that is something that you can specifically do for someone that has a certain or specific issue that they're dealing with. Um, yeah.
So are these protocols evidence-based in Western science as well? I mean, I know they're already established within Eastern medicine and different
Right.
Eastern traditions, but here in the West, have we sort of caught up and published anything on that? Did they show you that in the certification course?
I don't think I do. I know that they did not show us anything that I would consider a published journal. But there are lots of case studies. So, like, I'm actually required as part of my certification to do, I think, at least 9 different case studies myself, where I have sessions with people and I'll go through kind of like a survey of questions of before, during, after to see what their subjective experience is. And then, maybe I'll do some follow up with them to see if they are attributing any of the improvements or, I guess, declines for that matter with the sound therapy.
Yeah, I love that because uh, you know, Western science is a tool, and sometimes I feel like this tool is not yet caught up to being able to
Yeah,
measure
yeah,
some of these more, ethereal, esoteric, whatever you want to call it, type of modalities in healing. And case studies, man, case studies are so valuable to the literature to be able to explore things like this that the scientific method it just hasn't figured out how to do. Which I mean, they have. I don't know if they introduced you to the field of cymatics. Did they teach you about cymatics?
no, I can't say I'm familiar.
Yeah, so cymatics is it's an emerging field in science where they take like these metal square plates and they vibrate. They put sand on them and then they vibrate them at different frequencies. And what you'll notice is that when the sand and the metal vibrate at various frequencies, they form symmetric geometric shapes. Very
Yeah, I've seen that.
yeah, so very complex shapes, and then there's frequencies that will distort the sand, and it's believed that those are like frequencies that are not good for your health, or like cancerous type frequencies, and then the ones that they get really complex and find that balance, find that harmony, and show these geometric patterns. That these are the frequencies that maybe sound healers should be engaging with in order to, things like ultrasound. Ultrasound is a sound. It's a sound tool. It breaks down cells using certain frequencies. So we should be able to extend that technology with what we know to move mountains if we wanted to with sound.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. So what I have heard, and I can't say that there's any sort of scientific evidence for this, but 432 hertz is, I guess, in the sound community is known to be a healing frequency, which is what a lot of these instruments are tuned to. So, and I think it also has to do with these are also the same frequency that a lot of chants and mantras are tuned to as well. So I mean, if you take that as evidence, I guess it does have a bit of credibility to it.
Yeah, definitely. I really like singing bowls. That's one of my favorites. And then, man, something about the didgeridoo, like especially in altered states, the didgeridoo takes me back to like that bottom layer, the most primordial force from the field. You know, it takes me back to that goop. Um, and it's just amazing. You know, I've been in ceremonies before where drums have been used and other, rattles and things like that. And some of these traditional or indigenous instruments that have been used since man gathered around a fire. We've been doing fire
Right.
drum circles. That has stuck with us as a species. You know, this use of sound, but it almost seems like we've lost the technology that comes along with sound here in Western culture. Whereas, you know, in Tibet, there's accounts of Tibetan monks using sound and vibration, using instruments to levitate huge rocks and do all these amazing things. But we like lost this connection with the most fundamental thing, which is vibration and frequency.
Right. And yeah, I think that kind of comes along with the loss of connection from yourself, right? I think we're disconnecting from ourselves, really. And like the symptoms of that are so obvious, like the way that a lot of people treat the environment, the way that they treat themselves shows a massive disconnect, because if you truly were connected to yourself, then you wouldn't maybe be doing these really harmful and disharmonic things. Like, you know, what your actions are going to do is create the ripple effect. And are you creating harmonious ripples, or are you creating this disharmony? Because those are all going to come back to you. And kind of that phrase of like, you reap what you sow, you know, that's whatever type of vibration, whatever type of attitude you're putting out there will come back to you.
I love this philosophy. The I don't know if you've seen this guy on Facebook. I think his name is Prince EA. Spells his name EA. But he has this video where he breaks down the word universe, and it says uni and verse, one and song. And so we're all part of this one song, this one vibration, and it all goes together so beautifully and so perfectly. But when we're trying to force things within that song, that's when we reach these disharmonies and this it's pretty nuts, you know, to think of consciousness and all that exists as, you know, one big song that we're a very important and crucial but very small part of.
Yeah, and like, so going off that metaphor or analogy, you, in order to add harmony to that song, you would have to know your part in it, right? You can't just be throwing out random things, because, like you said, that's partially where the disharmonic states will come. And so I guess that just goes back to what we said about, if you are truly connected to yourself, then you'll kind of know, like, what's your verse, what's your note, like what sort of tune should you be singing in order to contribute to that greater song and that greater beauty.
Right, like what contribution can you make? So I mean, I'd like to ask you about ceremony for a little bit, and please speak to your comfort level. But in my experiences, like being in ceremony, whether indigenous or Western ceremony, it has a profound effect on like being able to realign me and bring me back into that balance where, you know, I'll emerge from a teepee in the morning or a sweat lodge and have this complete connection with nature and everybody who was in there, and it's just been amazing. I'm wondering if you could talk about your experiences with ceremony, maybe some altered state stuff in there too, and what sort of growth or insights have you gained for your personal growth process?
So I've been a part of 2 ayahuasca ceremonies, and I'd have to say that one of the greatest things that I am able to take away from those ceremonies is just such a level of clarity and knowing like what my next steps are, feeling good about those next steps, what I can do to lead the life that I want to lead. And so, as an example, the last ceremony, ayahuasca ceremony that I went to was, I want to say like September last year, and some crazy things were happening in my personal life. Um, my grandmother was not doing good health wise, but literally the same day that the ceremony, we were supposed to go up to someone's place for the ceremony, I got news that my grandmother was going into hospice care and that she didn't have much time left. And so I called the facilitator and I asked him, I said, is this a good idea for me to be going into the ceremony with like how I'm feeling with this news? Is this something that could potentially put me at risk? And I already had an answer formulated in my head, but I guess I just needed him to reaffirm that. And he basically said, the way I see it is these are the major types of life events that we need perspective on and we need closure on. And if you're familiar with how altered states can benefit you, and like if you're familiar with working through them, then you know that you could potentially use it to help you find a deeper meaning and resolution to what's going on. And that was exactly what I was thinking. I was like, yeah, it's going to be intense. I know that, but I think this is something that could really help me. So I, got in my car and I was like, okay, yeah, we're going to go do this. We're going to see what comes out of this. And as intense or painful as it needs to be, I'm going to stick with it because I know that when you stick with those difficult emotions, when you give them space, when you allow them to expand and then naturally contract, there's this wisdom and this knowledge that kind of like pops out from behind. And it was there the whole time, but you needed to give yourself time to let those emotions subside. And that's exactly what happened the first night of ceremony, which was very unusual for me because I I drank the first cup of ayahuasca, and the facilitator came back in an hour, and he'll check in and say, "Are you feeling the medicine?" And I wasn't, which isn't totally uncommon. That kind of happens sometimes. And so he came back an hour later and said, "Okay, well, if you're not feeling it, would you like a second cup?" And I said, "Sure." So I took another cup, came back an hour later, and I still was not with the medicine. I was not feeling any sort of work at all going on. And actually, I was starting to get a little frustrated because of that. And so another hour went by, and the facilitator came by and he said, "Well, if you're still not feeling it, would you like to take another cup?" And I'm pretty hesitant because I don't think I've taken that much medicine before, and but again, I wasn't feeling anything, so I said, "Yeah, I'm here to really dive deep. So let's see what we can dig up." And so I took a third cup of medicine. 30 or so minutes later, I started to feel like a little discomfort, nausea, and I thought to myself, "Oh, okay, here it comes. Like it's gonna happen now." And I purged, um, and I'm still waiting for the medicine to, enter within me, and still nothing. Nothing happened. And actually, the ceremony finished, and I had not gone through the normal sort of process that at least I was expecting to. So that we went to bed that night, and wouldn't you know it, once I'm settled down and about to fall asleep, I get smacked with a bunch of shapes and presences, and just really engulfed. And pretty much the entire night I was kind of just convulsing and really cold. Um, but after that, I had this clarity, this rush of lessons and downloads that came to me, speaking to me about my grandmother, saying that this is the sadness that you're feeling, the sadness, that same sadness other people will be feeling. And the wisdom that you've gained from sitting with these emotions is there for other people as well. And they just need to know that. And so I decided then that I was going to speak at my grandmother's funeral to relay that message to everyone that needed to hear it. And it ended up being incredibly powerful for, I guess, almost everyone there. Just letting them know that they're allowed to feel this sadness, like grief and loss. This is a very natural part of life. The next step of life is that transition. And so for them to give themselves permission to feel that way really just unlocked these blockages that I think a lot of people have been feeling. And it was really nice to know that my truth that I discovered through that ceremony was able to resonate so clearly with so many other people, and help them find comfort in a very sad and grief-filled time.
That's awesome, man. That experience and how you were able to integrate it like right away, and integrate it in a way that not only benefited you but benefited others too. I think that's so important with altered states integration. Is like the message isn't just for you, it's for all humanity. Right. And yeah, you have to do something to let people know what you discovered. Yeah, it's incredible. And my first ayahuasca experience was very similar. Not in that I was going in with news like that, but I sat through 5 rounds of ayahuasca distribution and didn't feel a thing. And then the guy's like, well, you can have some of my personal stash. And I took a cup of his too, and still nothing until that night. I think it was when I was unconscious fully and dreaming. That's when things started happening for me. But I still left kind of disappointed. And the more I talked to friends about it, and the more I was like, I really didn't get anything from it. They enlightened me on something that I'd forgotten, that every experience is beneficial. It's for your benefit. It has something to teach you. And even though I didn't get what I was expecting from it, there's still learning there. And so then I went on a quest to figure out, like, well, what did I learn from this experience of not experiencing anything? And come to find out, now I have this new belief that, and an observation too, it comes from other observations, that my first exposure to most molecules or substances usually turns out that way, where it doesn't have much of an effect the first time. But my theory is that my body takes that first exposure as sort of like an acclimation, like getting used to how this thing is communicating with the organism, and we're forming a relationship here. So then usually on the second time I try it, and I hear this with people who try cannabis too, the second time you try it, your body's already used to the molecule, and now it can start to really utilize it and use it in the way that it is intended. So that's what I took from that experience of not experiencing. You also, you mentioned, started going on a rant here, but you mentioned this other piece in the very beginning about how altered states allow you to fully expand before that contraction and healing comes, right? Mm-hmm. And I think so many people are afraid of the expansion, right? Because it's scary, it's emotional, it's painful, but these psychedelics hold us in this space, in altered states of all kinds, meditation, dreams, all sorts. They hold us in this space where we can let go a little bit and expand to that full capacity, feel it in its most intense form. And then once you've done that, it just doesn't seem as powerful anymore. It naturally contracts. It's like a natural process that we're inhibiting by being afraid of expanding.
Yeah, and like that, it's understandable. Like you said, it's a very scary process, especially if you're not super familiar with it. If it's unknown to you, then you don't know what's on the other side, and that's gonna get a lot of people worked up and just not even want to go there. And that's kind of where we see a lot of cases of people avoiding certain issues, avoiding things in their life, ignoring or dismissing. But ultimately, those things don't just go away. They'll show up. They'll hide in your subconscious. They'll come out in the way that you behave, and the way that you treat people, the way that you treat yourself. And so having that sort of understanding has helped me a lot in being like, okay, let's face this. Like, I don't want this to become a habit of mine that's going to negatively affect other people or cause myself or others suffering. So let's deal with this in the best way that we can.
So let's talk about a couple of those really important layers of the mind that we need to, I guess, understand more and have, a better relationship with. So you have an interest, or initially at least, in the subconscious and the unconscious. And these are terms that are thrown around in Western psychology as well. And they have totally different meanings than the Eastern mysticism traditions have for subconscious and unconscious. I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about each layer, how they're different, how people might engage them day to day, and like how we can engage them better?
Yeah, so let me just check myself real quickly here. I don't want to be giving out any misinformation. But so while I'm checking this out, I can speak a little bit to how the subconscious, unconscious affect our daily interaction. So as we're going through life, we have these things called formative experiences, right? They're things that help us develop views of the world and establish beliefs within ourselves to help navigate the world. And for the most part, say that again?
They're like patterns, right? That we form as like a means of survival, right? Like we learn until we figure out a puzzle, and then we sort of cement that in as a pattern.
Yeah, and cement is a pretty good word for it, because these formative experiences, as you're going through them, they will cement these beliefs into you. So to give an example, from one of the therapy books that I'm reading, there was a girl and her dad wanted to teach her a lesson about trusting people. And so he had her standing on a table, and he said, "Go ahead and jump to me." And so she jumped to him, and he let her fall. And he looked at her and said, "That's why you don't trust anybody." And so this is an extreme example, but for her, that's cemented in the belief you cannot trust anyone. And so the subconscious and unconscious mind, they took that experience, they cemented that belief into her, and now, even though she's not fully aware of it, that experience is now not controlling necessarily, but has a huge influence over how she treats people, how she treats herself, how she goes about her daily interactions. So that's kind of an example for you.
Okay. What about, like, sometimes I get confused between subconscious and unconscious, even though, to me, unconscious seems more like, when you're asleep, or you have a near-death experience or something like that, whereas subconscious is something that's sort of always running in the background while you're awake and conscious, right? So To me, that's
Yeah.
a big distinction between unconscious and subconscious. Is that one has some history, some reasons why you're acting that way, right? That's the subconscious. Whereas unconscious, if you make an unconscious decision, there was no reasoning there at all. It was just sort of like you were in this sleep state, sort of
Right.
disconnected from waking everyday reality.
Yeah, and I'd say that's a pretty good description. I just saw some stuff that's make solidifying some definitions in my own head here. The subconscious being something that might be a little more accessible to us, something that is not at the forefront of our awareness, right? It's kind of, running in the background, but if we are mindful enough, we could turn our attention towards it. Unconscious are these like automatic and habit sort of behaviors that happen totally without any sort of awareness. So like the way that your posture is, the tone of your voice, and the your body language, the way you're moving, or juxtaposing yourself towards other people, is all indicative of the formative experiences that have been cemented into your unconscious mind.
It's almost like your behavior in that way is sort of an amalgam of all these lessons learned from the past, but
Exactly.
but there's always a choice, well, not always,
Right.
or maybe always, that's a big question too. But I don't know, I have this feeling that we have some sense, or maybe it's still an illusion, but free will at least exists as a concept, and we can lean into that a little bit, even if this is a simulation and everything is determined ahead of time.
Yeah.
We can still feel a sense of agency over our actions. And if, like you said, if we can recognize first, like what those things are, what those patterns are, that gives us a huge step forward in being able to make that decision of like, I don't want this anymore. This is not serving me.
Right. Yeah, and so I would agree. I think there's agency to a degree. Not that it, gives away any responsibility on a person, but so like I think the things that you're aware of, you absolutely have agency over. But maybe some of those unconscious habits, some of those things that just automatically happen, like how certain people react to certain situations, they may not always have that awareness to give them that choice. But I think if you are able to reflect on certain experiences and bring that awareness to those reactions, then that's when you start having the agency to make changes to the unconscious habits. And so that's kind of what the psychosomatic therapy book that I'm reading really touches on. They dig into the unconscious mostly through the somatic, the body expression. So if they see someone that is crossing their arms and not fully looking at you, or maybe their head is tilted towards you while you're speaking, it could be very indicative of someone not trusting you, or maybe has the habit of not trusting people because maybe that's hurt them in the past. So you use those somatic markers, they call them, in order to set up little experiments for the therapist. And so let's use the head tilting example, where someone may not believe what you're telling them. And so the therapist says, okay, maybe they don't believe what I'm saying, so I'm going to set up a little experiment. And the experiments are given in the form of statements, usually. And so they ask, and so mindfulness is actually a huge part of this type of therapy. It's called Hakomi therapy. And so the therapist develops a relationship with the client and helps them enter into mindful states where they can, track their emotions, track their bodily sensations, and maybe associated memories that are going along with that. And so they help them enter into a mindful state. And then this is where they will execute their experiments. And they'll give a statement such as, "You can trust me." And then they wait and they see how the person reacts, whether it's a bodily movement or a lot of times it's just a statement. Like after the statement of "you can trust me," the client might react, "Yeah, right." They like this automatic response comes up deep from down within because they were able to enter that mindful state. And so what they did was they just brought that unconscious aspect out, and they say, "Okay, let's take a look at this. Let's see and dissect this a little bit. Where did this come from? How does this make you feel? What are you experiencing when you are looking at this?" And so by doing that, they reveal the formative experiences, like maybe that traumatic experience that happened when they were 7 years old, and they're able to bring that back and say, "Okay, now we know where this is coming from, and now that we're aware of it, we have agency over it." And this is when we can really start to make those changes to those formative beliefs that are stored and kind of almost trapped in the unconscious mind.
That mind-body connection that you talk about with the psychosomatic exploration, like, it's so important. And unfortunately, a lot of Western psychotherapies are focused, too much on consciousness and not on the whole system, not on the holistic piece. So I think that's great. It makes me think, and well, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry, my dog is like poking his head in my door right now, and I think he just pushed the door open. But this mind-body connection, right? Super important, and I like to explore that a lot through, again, martial arts. Constantly, I'm in more of a battle up here in my mind than I am in the physical world, but that's still happening too. And so there's like multiple aspects going on, and trying to master all of that chaos and still find like flow, and still find instead of resistance, like leaning into and being finding flexibility to manage all those things all at once. So important. I haven't heard much about psychosomatic. I know about pure somatic therapies and pure psychotherapeutic, but it's great that that they have specialty programs now in that mind-body holistic style. So important.
Yeah, that's really what drew me to it, because I'm also, I was forming all these ideas about, like, the mind has this effect over the body has this effect over the mind. Like, you can't necessarily separate the two. You can't say that one does not affect the other. And so to see that there's a style of therapy that really speaks to that, and saying like, yeah, like we're going to treat both aspects, and we're going to use both aspects in order to help these people. And that holistic approach really is how I like to approach a lot of different things. Well, everything that I can. So that's what brought me to it.
Nice. Yeah, the more and more I stay in mental health and explore different ways of practicing, the more I see that that mindfulness component sort of bleeds through all of them, whether they use that language or not. It becomes a practice for the client, for the person receiving benefit, and for the therapist. It's about, like, where do you divert your attention? Where do you place it? Do you place it on positive? Do you place it on negative? Do you place it on judgment, period? Do you place it on struggle? And where do you put your attention? Is it in the past? Is it in the future? And instead, again, taking agency over that capacity, right, as a human being, to not just let your attention go wherever it's going to go and become frazzled and disharmonious, but really focus and practice diverting your attention in a specific direction, and you'll find that you become, less shakeable by outside circumstances, more centered, happier, more fulfilled, finding more meaning in your life, all these things. I'm wondering why, there's definitely a reason why we still exist, right, as therapists. So my hope, though, is that we can get to a point where human beings realize that they don't need us. They can access these things on their own. What a day that'll be.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like that's one of the true markers of a healer, right? Is to show people that they have the ability to heal themselves. And maybe as a therapist or as a healer, your job may be just to show them that, like show them that's a possibility. Maybe give them some tools to assist them on their journey. But yeah, that's kind of what I feel like a healer is about, is helping someone connect so deeply to themselves that they can start to have a choice about where their life is going. And what you said about the attention, like where you put your attention is where you put your awareness is where you put your energy. I think Joe Dispenza said that. And yeah, he's absolutely right, because if you're putting your focus on the negative, if we're putting our focus on the media frenzy around the pandemic and the protests, like that's what's going to be going through you. That energy is going into you, and no wonder you're frazzled. No wonder you're all worked up, because that's what they're putting out there, and that's what you're taking in. But if you choose to focus on something positive, things that bring you joy in your life, then guess what? You're most likely going to start feeling that positivity. And the more you make that a habit, the more that those habits will start to hold you up rather than bring you down. Because if we're making habits that are unhealthy or not wholesome or conducive to our health or a good attitude, then yeah, like where do you think you're going to go? Probably not in the upward direction.
Yeah. Have you always wanted to be a healer? Because you said you had a background in chemistry too, so I'm wondering if you had this pull in some way to be a healer back then, or if not, like how the hell did that transition happen? Going from a STEM science to a science that's not really backed by science yet, you know?
Yeah, very fair question. I would say I never wanted to necessarily be a healer, so to speak, but I can say that as I grew up, I always did want to help. Like if I saw someone that was in need, well, actually, I'll say that my ability to see someone in need was, it drew me towards the person. So that wanted me to figure out, or helped me to figure out, how can I help? How can I be of assistance? And then
I lost your audio. Sorry.
kind of like little experiences going along in my life, but more that I realized that I was, and it was just so rewarding to be of assistance, to be of service, and help someone relieve their own suffering. And so, yeah, like that ultimately after a healing session with a Tibetan monk, again, I had that ultimate state of clarity, and I was just like, I know what I want to do to help people. And that's when I pretty much the next day went out to the Denver Museum, no, the Denver Rock and Gem Mineral Show, and they had a whole section of Himalayan singing bowls, and I just got a professional set and started practicing, and wouldn't you know it, that ended up being the people that I go to school with, and that's the people I'm getting the certification through. So yeah, like all these things just kind of lining up, and here I am.
Great. I'm fascinated by the Tibetan ceremony that you went through, because in my own Buddhist practice, I sort of follow an amalgam of different traditions, but Tibetan Buddhism is one of the most mature ones that I sort of value and hold their ideals So I'm wondering, like, what was that like for you to go through a Tibetan-based ceremony, where, most people think of Tibetan monks as like these really peaceful people, and they really are, but
Yeah.
they are psychonauts to the extreme. They explore altered states of consciousness beyond what we have ever seen, probably with psychedelics and things like that. So, they bring that with them, this heightened awareness of other dimensions and things like that. I'm wondering, what was that ceremony like for you?
Yeah, so it was intense, let me tell you. So I can't say I know the name of his specific style that he does. Um, I mean, it could just generally be classified as energy work and body work. And so when I when I heard about him, and I was imagining or expecting basically to just kind of go into a nice quiet room, and he might like put his hands over me or maybe do some hands-on sort of stuff. But when I got there, we ended up being outside in a really nice tranquil backyard, and he had me sitting down at first, and then I started doing a bunch of breathing exercises, rapid breathing, and then he started positioning me in all sorts of different configurations, some of them being very uncomfortable. And I'm also continuing to do the breathing, and he's also manipulating me and also like pressing into certain pressure points and things. And it was painful. It was brutally painful. But not the sort of pain like I'm breaking something. Just it was physical pain, but also like an emotional, energetic pain. It's really hard to describe. Um, and and so halfway through this, and I'm just getting exhausted because I'm doing this rapid breathing. I'm holding myself in all funky sorts of positions. And this entire time he is so in tuned with my body that he can sense and know and then tell me what part of my body is out of alignment. Like if I was supposed to have my elbow bent at a certain way and my hand placed a certain way, and just the moment that I moved any which way out of the way that he wanted me to, he was immediately on top of me and said, put your arm back, leg straight, put your neck down, and just like making sure I was staying in the specific configuration that was needed for energy to flow through my body or release blockages, etc. And and halfway through this, he's holding my head down, and I'm just so in this experience, and I hear him say, "I'm inside your brain." And I'm just so in it that I kind of just, let it go in one ear and out the other. And we finally finished the session after about an hour. And so this is the part of the session where he tells me what he saw and what he felt as he was working through me. And the things that he told me, I don't tell my girlfriend. I don't tell these things to other people. And he was just giving out my approaches, giving out my secrets. And I was like, no wonder, like, of course he was inside my brain, because he's telling me all the things that I know only to the truest extent for myself. And so it blew my mind. But at the same time, I was just so clear after doing that work. And that's when I decided about the sound therapy path. So it was a beautiful and great experience. And like you said, that everyone thinks they're kind of like these really peaceful people. And like he does have, a solid aspect of peace to him, but he's a fireball. He loves to talk, he loves to jump around, he's very animated, so very much his own personality.
Yeah, it sounds like he was doing psychosurgery on you.
Yeah.
And I've had some experiences like that with some shaman that came up from Brazil, and I swear it seems, and I know this to be true. I was watching it as it happened, but they're able to enter like this this other plane, this other dimension, this other spiritual realm, and see that in you too. You know, they can see right through the physical facade that's standing in front of them, and they can see those elements, those areas of tension, and then, man, they're so skillful at being able to identify them and then work them out of you on this, like, this fifth or sixth or seventh dimensional plane that you have like, no access to, right? So I love that kind of medicine work, and just being able to put the trust in somebody else that they can see something that maybe you've, you know, in your consciousness have blocked yourself from that, and be able to heal that has been so immense in my own experience.
And it was really powerful to have gone through that experience myself, because you know I've seen and heard other stories, but you don't truly know until you go through it yourself, and you feel that very personal connection, and you're like, wow, this is for real. This person is the real deal.
Yeah, and that was part of my first ayahuasca experience too. I didn't have complete trust in the facilitator. I had never met them before, and there was a white guy, and I was just like, you know, isn't this the Amazonian tradition? Like, you know, so that wasn't there, you know, and I think that was a big part of the medicine sort of not agreeing with my body. It wasn't the right time or place for that kind of you know, through the veil type experience. But then, you know, I've had other facilitators that I've met only once, and just right away, like, I feel like, yes, I trust you with my spiritual self. Like, please help me with this. And you know, I've experienced such great healing from that kind of thing. You know, it's amazing. So I'm interested. What do you think about going back to sound a little bit?
Sure.
What do you think about? I've had this thought that sound, right, it works on the level of frequency and vibration, and there's certain frequencies we can't hear, right, like dog whistles, things like that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, do you think sound possibly has this ability to access other dimensions, or maybe it could be used as a tool for interdimensional communication? I've had a couple of DMT experiences where I've literally seen you know, little elves running around assembling matter right in front of me, and it's like so real. They know I'm there, you know, and they're trying to communicate, but it's on this different frequency, right? It's on this different vibration that I can't see in everyday life. I'm wondering if, like, can music potentially like bridge that gap between what we experience here on the third dimension to maybe fourth, fifth, sixth dimensions? I think it's possible for sure.
I think it's not only possible, I think it is happening all the time, and we're just not aware of it. Like, when you put this music out there, when you put this vibration out there, it's not just on this plane. It is already interacting with the other dimensions and potential other beings that are existing there. And so part of the reason I think that is because in a lot of the ayahuasca ceremonies, they have their own songs, right? They have their own music, so to speak, and these songs are meant to elicit different things, whether they want to dredge up things to help you purge, or maybe to help calm you down, you know. And so I think that it absolutely is interacting on these other planes, and the only time we're really aware of it is maybe when we're in ceremony or in those elevated states of consciousness that they're already interacting with. So yeah, I absolutely think so.
Yeah, I agree. I had a crazy LSD experience once. I think I had taken 3 hits, you know, I don't even remember when, probably last fall. And I sat under the stars and listened to the new Tool album. I don't know if you've heard it, Fear Inoculum, and man, I felt, I mean, you talk about seeing sounds, like I could see the waveforms coming out of the speaker and floating off into the universe and interacting with things. It was a totally different experience to hear that Tool album and to hear what those artists were doing. It literally felt like they were bending time and space with the sounds that they were producing.
Mhm.
I just found like this whole other dimension or depth to it. It almost like the music came out of the speaker and took like a 5-dimensional form for me. It was
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah. So the way I kind of see it is that the different substances are, I guess you could say, helping us see and or hear through different lenses.
Mhm.
And so I guess the analogy could be like there's an antenna, a radio antenna, and you turn it to certain frequencies in order to hear that station, right? And so that's kind of the tuning mechanism is these substances. So if we take LSD, we're tuning into this certain frequency or this sort of wavelength. And same thing with a different substance, MDMA, ketamine, whatever. And so it tunes us into that wavelength, and then we're perceiving this reality through that wavelength. And so maybe what like your sort of experience could have been was you're tuned into this different wavelength, and now you're seeing, not on your normal wavelength. It feels like a totally different or new experience because you're able to interact with those dimensions that are on that same frequency, and it's extra dimensional.
That's almost like the music became a life force, like an organism that came alive. It was more than just sound. It was pure emotion.
Right, you could
I could
feel, yeah.
feel what was coming through from the artists.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
incredible. I just think that sound is such an important and fundamental aspect of the universe that we should pay more attention and divert like more energy to rediscovering sound technologies and ways
yeah,
to heal via sound. And I think it's there. It's already there for us. It's not like we have to like set up a factory and produce a bunch of things. Like we can figure out how to take advantage of what's already being presented to us and what's been with us for ages, right? It's going back to
yeah,
the beginning of humans. We need to re-engage with those fundamental components of reality. I think we're getting lost these days in a lot of like surface level, survivalistic based, layers of our consciousness. People
yeah,
are afraid, and so they're reacting to things rather than responding, with
yeah,
wisdom and slowing down. So I don't know. I hope that we can re-engage with sound in a positive way for healing the world and come together around that.
mhm.
I also see the militarized version of sound too being used in some of these
Oh,
fights.
absolutely. Yeah,
Focus sounds to give people headaches and to disperse crowds and things like that. There's
yeah,
one of my favorite, I guess, negative sounds that I've heard of. It's kind of funny. I think I heard of it on South Park. Is this? It's called the poop note. So it's like a it's like a frequency that that a human being can pick up on that just makes you lose all control of your bowels. And I think like those are like weaponized forms of sound, right? Like
right.
you can use it for destruction, or we can use it to harmonize and bring everybody into this inclusive one song. Like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and I agree, man. I think people really do need to reconnect with that sound, the understanding that sound is vibration and vibration can have an effect on you. And that's kind of maybe unconsciously what I'm trying to do is help people reconnect with sound and that understanding, like the very rudimentary concept of vibration, how it can move you not just physically but emotionally and spiritually.
Yeah, are you a musician in your life too?
So I used to be a singer. I'm not very good at instruments. I kind of play the harmonica, but in pretty much all through elementary, middle, high school, all of grade school, I was in choir. So I do enjoy singing. I especially love chanting. And yeah, I don't know. I just get a lot of connection out of that form of expression. It's really fun.
I'm the same way, singer through middle school and
Yeah.
elementary and things like that. And I only practice these days in the shower or in front of my wife. But I too, I feel more connected when I am expressing myself. In altered states, I'll often sing too, just because I can feel
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
resonance. It feels so good to become like unblocked from this,
Yeah.
throat chakra, just like let it out.
Mm.
Such an amazing feeling. So what kind of music do you listen to day? Like what's on your playlist? What's on Andrew's playlist?
A lot of electronic for the most part. My friends and I are pretty big into the electronic music scene. Um, but I used to be pretty heavy into like the dubstep, grimy sort of crunchy tunes. And I still do really appreciate them, but I've been noticing my tendency to gravitate towards more finesse sort of. It's still electronic, it's still groovy, but the subtleties, the nuances in the music, I'm appreciating those more, and I find myself more in I don't know how, just calmer sort of music. Um, but yeah, so and it's tougher now because so Spotify has their algorithm of your Discover Weekly, and so now I'm just getting bombarded with all these people I had never heard of, and you know, it's it's hard to say specific artists now because I used to just listen to like a lot of one artist and then kind of go from artist to artist, but now it's like a million different artists, but a similar tone to it and a similar sort of melody that goes. Um, but yeah, so let's see if I can give an example of like Cashmere Cat, maybe some the floozies sort of stuff. But yeah, so that's definitely my music. But I really appreciate some of the really classic stuff. Just like Frank Sinatra and maybe getting into dang it, I was listening to the song the other day. Um, it's escaping me right now, but yeah. The majority of my music is definitely electronic, and then every once in a while I'll kind of dip into some of those other genres once I'm feeling them.
Nice. Yeah, I've been trying to rediscover electronic, but you're right. There's so much out there now. Like I remember when I was into it before it was high school, so it was like late '90s, and I can remember like Diesel Boy and Aphrodite and people like that. So it's been a while since I've dug into it, and it's interesting exploring different styles and sort of seeing like what's my jam these days. But I'm tend to be more. So I come from like a punk rock heavy metal background.
Mm,
That's where I really discovered music, and now like you said like with your dubstep, I used to be into like hardcore grunge metal, but now I'm more into like ambient rock or
yeah,
post rock, where there's no words even, and it's just super intricate, very detail oriented nuance, like you said, in electric
yeah,
guitar, in different drum beats, and incorporation of different cultural instruments and all these sort of
yeah.
things. That's really what I've really been getting into recently. But
Mm,
I'll listen to some rap some days. I've been listening to Prince and David Bowie lately, like
yeah.
re-examining those guys and their genius way back then. And so yeah, I'm kind of all over the place except for country. We have a rule in our house: no country music.
Yeah. I wonder why that's such a common response to the genre of country. There's so many people I feel like around in our area of Colorado that really do enjoy country, and I question myself. I'm like, why? What resonates in this song for people that enjoy this style of music? And I haven't been able to quite put my finger on it, except for I do notice that there's quite a bit of complaining in country, like a yearning for older times, a yearning for simplicity, sort of thing. And maybe that's what they're resonating with, is like, I wish my life was simpler, like it was in the olden days, sort of thing.
Yeah, it just whenever I listen to it, it just makes me sad. Like it has this quality that invokes
Yeah,
sadness within me. Like you said, like wanting an older, simpler time, and there are
yeah,
some happy country songs out there. Most I still don't connect with, but I respect the genre because it's largely like an American thing. It's a product of America. It's something that
yeah,
we should be proud of, that the world recognizes. And so I still pay respect to people like Johnny Cash and some of
absolutely.
some of the originators of country music. But just like a lot of genres, it's so watered down today. Like a lot of this, you turn on any radio station, I just can't stand any radio station these days. They just play all the poppy stuff that reaches me on like the most surface level possible. I don't
Yeah,
get
or the
any
talk shows
depth.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, the talk shows, I mean, have almost a similar effect to me that like media frenzy does, where I just am so bombarded with, I don't know, ignorance to a degree, and I feel it lowering my vibration. I feel just not great coming away from it. So yeah, for the most part, I don't even listen to the radio anymore.
Yeah, well, it's like a diet, right? People don't think about what they take in through their ears and eyes as part of their diet, but those
Yeah, that's
those things that you take in like have probably more effect on your frequency and vibration than physical food that you take in your diet. That's really important too. But people, I think, need to expand their concept of what a diet is and think about holistic health in this way, right? Like I want
yeah.
to choose to only ingest things that are going to make me feel good. So I'm going to pay
Mhm.
attention to positive things in the news. I'm going to put positive things out in the world. I'm going to watch, you know, movies that make me feel good about myself instead of, news programs or movies that make me feel depressed or anything like that, right?
Yeah, and so, well, I do think that there is like a theatrical beauties to some movies or other things that may, make you feel sad. But like you said, and I love this concept of expanding the diet. Like if you bombard yourself with those things, then most likely you're going to start feeling that way. So yeah, like any diet, it needs to be balanced, making sure you're taking in some of that theatrical sad beauty, but also that like positivity. Yeah, that's a really cool concept and something that I definitely noticed. So, unfortunately, my girlfriend's grandfather is on hospice care currently, and so we went out last week to spend some time with him. He's got stage 4 brain cancer, and so his cognition is pretty spotty. Remembering things is kind of difficult. Um, so it was a rough experience. But so he would like to have the news on, and I think he would like to have the news on just because it was a habit of his, something that might be comforting. But I was noticing, especially Fox News, which is what he was listening to, it just, even though I was trying to kind of tune it out as I was in that space, I just felt parts of my inside just being like, I need to get out of here. Like I can't continue to listen to this. I mean, I can, but it's very taxing. Like it was sapping a lot of energy from me, um, and I was at a very I had a scarcity of energy because I was trying to provide comfort for my girlfriend and for her grandfather, and they're both emotionally drained. They're tired. They're afraid. They're upset, and they're uncomfortable. And so I really had to make sure I was taking care of myself during that experience because, man, it was exhausting and pretty traumatizing to a degree, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I've noticed that even if I can manage situations like that cognitively, and sort of turn them down, or just ignore that sort of news and fear in the background, my bodies can still pick up on it. Like, I'm not the only one listening to the news. Like, there's all sorts of microorganisms in my body that have their own level of consciousness. You're listening to that, and changing because of that frequency, that vibration that's being put out there. So I definitely feel that same thing, that even if you're really skilled with coping with the mind, you still got to be able to tune into that body and engage that mind-body connection, so that you can check in and say, look, I need time away from this. This is super. This is really affecting my body in a bad way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that whole situation, it it was really good for us to go out there, to have my girlfriend connect with her grandfather before he passes, and for also, it was an opportunity for me to be a pillar of support for both of them, and I'm super grateful for that opportunity. As taxing as it was, I felt like I learned so much, just spending time with someone that you knew they didn't have much time left, and so you saw all the things that were coming up from earlier in their life that maybe they hadn't resolved, or maybe they hadn't dealt with, and it was just a good reminder, to be present and to deal with things as they come and as you can, because those things don't come away, and unfortunately they could maybe even haunt you into the afterlife.
I wonder what sort of an effect it would have had on you and your girlfriend, but especially your girlfriend's grandfather, if instead of the news he was playing in the background, it was like classical music or something. Because there's lots of studies out there showing, even for like plant life or for infant brain development, like playing certain types of music it initiates growth factors in the brain, right? For infants, and then for people with like Alzheimer's or dementia, or the elderly who are sort of transitioning between, this life and the afterlife. I wonder what that effect could have been.
So we actually did play classical music for him. That was one of the things. We didn't always have the news on. We kind of cycled in and out of different genres and things. I actually even brought one of my smaller singing bowls with me to play with him. And I can't say for sure, but I know I was definitely feeling better when classical music was playing. Um, and there were definitely some nights where playing the singing bowls, and this is a very common effect for a lot of people, but the singing bowl either puts you into that alpha or theta brainwave state, or you just fall asleep. And so it was useful for him to get that relaxed state, and because he wasn't getting much sleep with how uncomfortable he was. So that was kind of like one of the tools that I used to increase his level of comfort, or at least help him get a little bit more rest.
So with your training in the psychosomatic piece and being able to pick up on like these body cues when you do these like little experiments, right? And adding the classical music and the singing bowl is like one of those experiments. Were you able to notice any other maybe subconscious shifts in her grandfather when you would, put that on versus during the news? Was he more angry during the news? Like, did you notice anything?
I can't say I was paying certain attention when the news was going on, simply because I was involved with maintaining my own center very intensely during like the news section. But But when I was playing the singing bowl, or even when I was singing or chanting to him, his normal mode at that point was very fidgety, you know, like kind of moving the hands around, grasping at things, moving, shifting. And so when I was playing or singing or chanting, those calmed down quite a bit. And, you know, like I said, to the degree where he would sometimes fall asleep. So that was cool to see. And, you know, also just relieving because, you know, I could feel that he was being comforted at least a little bit and getting some sort of relief for himself.
Yeah, again, you know, I go back to that. I think sound in so many of its different forms can be used, you know, even at an end of life type situation,
Yeah.
you know, to bring comfort, to bring clarity, to bring, you know, movement of things that need to be resolved before passing on, all these things. And, you know, we don't hear about that. We don't hear about, you know, people engaging with these. It's a little disappointing from my point of view. It's probably disappointing from yours too. Now with all this knowledge about sound and healing, so I don't know. How do we? What do you think? What do you think would be a good way for listeners out there who are interested in engaging this piece of themselves? Like, how might someone get started in um, maybe self-guided sound healing, and then like where would people look for professionally guided sound healing?
Yeah. So in terms of getting started with yourself, it's pretty simple. Like all you need is yourself and maybe your voice if that's accessible to you. One of the things I started out doing was just simple ohms, chanting ohms, and you just chant and you know trying not to feel self-conscious about it, maybe go find a private area to go do that and just play around with it, you know, chant, go play with the tone, play with your mouth structure, going from like a traditional om to like a om, and just getting a feel for it. And as you're doing that, notice how you are feeling emotionally. How are you feeling spiritually? Are you having any sort of responses, bodily sensations, or anything that might be coming up for you? And so that's a really simple way just to get started. If you don't have any instruments, if you don't have any training, you don't really need those things to just chant with yourself. In terms of getting professional sessions or experience that way, you you can easily do a Google search. That's how I actually found the school that I'm going to now. And there there's usually if you look up a school like a sound therapy school or something, they almost always have practitioners available to do sessions for you. And that's I would say that's a very good resource, is because the instructors there are always going to be very fresh with their practice because they're teaching almost all the time. So that's one way to do it. Looking, you could search certain keywords like sound baths. That's kind of like the most common and maybe popularized term for singing bowls and chanting or gong therapy, stuff like that. And yeah, in almost every major city, I feel like there's now people that offer those sorts of services for a relatively reasonable price, maybe anywhere from like $15 to $50 for a 30-minute to hour-long session.
Nice. Yeah, I want to develop and learn how to, because I have a singing background, I want to develop Tibetan throat singing ability.
Yeah,
And that really deep tonal voice. Like I accessed it one time, but I needed the assistance of psilocybin mushrooms to really get into that somatic place, right? Like I have a lot of trauma in my history, so it's difficult for me, or it has been in the past, to access the somatic level, right? I'm very cognitive, And so mushrooms really helped me to open up some of those somatic channels. And just one day in the mirror, on a couple grams of mushrooms, I took the risk and I tried it out. No one else was around, and I hit some of those notes that just reverberate with me, and I could feel like this immense energy building in my chest and in my stomach. And I was like, "What is this? Like, I gotta get good at this thing, you know?"
Yeah, and that's actually something I stumbled upon myself, was the throat singing, where you're able to low. I guess I don't want to give too many specifics about it because it's different for each person. But for me, it felt like I was lowering my voice, and then it got into this little chamber where it resonated and kind of just like vibrated back and forth and created a seemingly deeper tone. But yeah, it was just something that I stumbled upon after practicing doing ohms and, moving the throat up and down, changing different configurations of the mouth. And now it's something that I regularly include in my sound therapy practice.
I love that. I'd love to hear more of that, and like gatherings when people get together and ingest substances together. I'd love somebody to just bust out some throat singing, and maybe some didgeridoo, and I would be right there sitting in that circle just zoning out.
Yeah, those are the kind of gatherings that I like to put together, whether we have some friends over and maybe we have some substances that we were intentionally planning on taking in terms of using them for connection and self-exploration. And that's kind of how I help facilitate that atmosphere, is bring in some of my sound therapy instruments, do some chanting or some singing to really help people, first of all, relax, but then really get in touch with themselves and feel comfortable being vulnerable for that reward of connection and exploration.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time, and so I just have one last question for you. And I view this podcast sort of as a tabletop where each guest is a puzzle piece that comes as part of this 8 billion piece puzzle. And we're using this platform to sort of put the pieces together one by one so we can see this emerging picture. Maybe it's unity through consciousness. Who knows what it's going to be? But I'm wondering, like, what if you could say anything to the audience and contribute your piece to the puzzle? What would be something that you would add to that, to sort of some wisdom, some knowledge you've learned that could benefit humanity? Like you said, that contribution.
Yeah. So recently I was listening to Aubrey Marcus podcast, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And so he had someone on that really, I feel like he really just hit the nail on the head. And he said that if you're not sure about what your mission is, then your mission is to get to know yourself and find your personal medicine. Because once you do that, then you can share that medicine with others. You can share that wisdom, you can share that truth, and help lift yourself and others up. And I genuinely feel like that's definitely my purpose. And I feel like if you're unsure about your purpose, try that perspective on for a little while and see what kind of challenges come up when you're trying to get to know yourself, because that's the most intense and fulfilling journey I think anyone can take.
I agree, and probably the most essential journey for anybody to embark on. Everybody needs to take an inner journey at one point of their life,
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Andrew, I want to say thank you again for joining the show today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you and get to know you. So thank you for spending the time that you did with us and expanding my mind for sure. I'm sure you are sending out ripples to all of our listeners too.
Thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed this time, Shane. After hearing other people that you've interviewed and just knowing what kind of effect this could have for some people, I was really excited to have the chance to talk with you, and I really appreciate you taking your time, and kind of this, I feel like, is your medicine, your mission to help expand knowledge and spread the word to other people about how they can fulfill their own journeys. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate hearing that. And to all you listeners out there, take the advice that was spoken today. This is all knowledge for our own benefit and for our own growth. Keep listening, and until next time, this has been Conversations with the Mind.
Conversations with the Mind podcast is sponsored by mindops.com. You can find us at www.mind-ops.com. We're an eclectic counseling company providing mental health and mental performance services to individuals, small and large groups, teams, businesses, military, through face-to-face sessions or at a distance using phone or confidential video chat apps. We bring a unique Buddhist Western lens and specialize in general psychotherapy for all mental difficulties, sport and performance psychology for performance enhancement, addiction counseling for any maladaptive or destructive habits, and psychedelic integration therapy to make the most from your visionary medicine work. We are available as well for corporate workshops to address the needs of your employees' wellness.